Story number 1. The Nameless Road. I never considered myself particularly superstitious. Growing up in Austin, surrounded by vibrant city lights and the hum of constant activity, the idea of encountering something otherworldly seemed more fitting for the pages of a thriller novel than my own life. But that summer night in Texas would change everything I thought I knew about reality. It was supposed to be a simple road trip. My girlfriend, Megan, and I had planned a getaway to explore the lesser-known parts of rural Texas, seeking solace from our demanding jobs and the relentless pace of city life. We packed our car with essentials: food, water, a tent, and a map that promised to guide us through scenic byways and hidden gems. The day started off perfectly. The sun shone brightly as we drove through endless fields of corn and wheat, the landscape stretching out in a serene panorama. Laughter filled the car as we sang along to our favorite songs, the open road offering a sense of freedom we hadn't felt in years. By late afternoon, we found ourselves approaching a stretch of countryside that seemed untouched by time. "Let's take the back roads," Megan suggested, pointing to a narrow dirt path that veered away from the main highway. Maps rarely cover these areas, but that's what makes them so intriguing. I nodded, trusting her instinct. After all, it was our adventure. We turned onto the dirt road, the gravel crunching under our tires. The sun began to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. As dusk settled in, the road appeared to stretch endlessly, the horizon blending seamlessly with the darkening sky. After a few miles, we realized we had lost our way. The familiar landmarks were nowhere to be seen, swallowed by the vast expanse of the Texas countryside. Megan pulled out the map, but the dirt road we had taken was nowhere to be found. "Maybe we missed a turn," she suggested, a hint of concern in her voice. Hours passed as we drove in circles, the road seemingly morphing before our eyes. The sky darkened, and the first stars began to twinkle overhead. The radio, which we had left on earlier, crackled to life, playing a static-filled tune that did little to ease our growing unease. "Let's just keep going," I urged, trying to maintain a sense of control. "We'll find our way back." But the road had other plans. It twisted and turned, leading us deeper into the heart of nowhere. Night enveloped us, and the temperature dropped sharply, the cool air pressing against the car's windows. We decided to set up camp for the night, parking on the side of the road under a canopy of towering oak trees. As we sat around the campfire, the flickering flames cast long shadows that danced eerily in the darkness. The sounds of the nocturnal wilderness surrounded us, crickets chirping, leaves rustling, and the occasional distant hoot of an owl. Megan snuggled closer, seeking warmth and comfort. "Did you hear that?" she whispered suddenly, breaking the silence. I strained my ears, but all I could hear was the gentle crackling of the fire. "Hear what?" A soft scratching sound emanated from the car. My heart skipped a beat as I grabbed a flashlight and cautiously approached the vehicle. The light beam swept across the windshield, revealing a startling sight: large, bloody handprints smeared across the glass. My stomach churned with fear as I turned to Megan, who stared back at me, eyes wide with terror. "What the hell?" I murmured, my voice barely audible. We stared in disbelief, the reality of the situation sinking in. The handprints were fresh, the blood still wet and glistening under the flashlight's glow. Without warning, the scratching intensified, now accompanied by a low, guttural growl that seemed to emanate from the very ground beneath us. "We need to leave," Megan said urgently, grabbing my arm. I nodded, fumbling with the car keys. But no matter how many times I tried, the engine refused to turn over. Desperation set in as we realized we were trapped. The road outside seemed to stretch on forever, leading us nowhere but deeper into the abyss of darkness. As midnight approached, the air grew colder, and the sounds outside the car became more pronounced. The scratching ceased abruptly, replaced by an eerie silence that pressed in on us from all sides. Suddenly, a flicker of movement caught my eye, a pair of glowing red eyes staring directly at us from the shadows. My blood ran cold as I watched the towering figure emerge from the darkness, its form indistinct but undeniably menacing. "And Megan," I stammered, my voice shaking. "We have to go." But the creature advanced, its presence overwhelming, its intentions clear. It reached out a massive hand, and in that moment, everything went black. When I awoke, the first light of dawn was breaking over the horizon. Megan was sitting beside me, her eyes blank, her skin pale as if drained of color. Panic surged through me as I tried to speak, but my throat felt tight, my voice lost in a vacuum of fear. "We need to leave," I managed to choke out, pulling her towards the car. But as we reached the driver's seat, something was horribly wrong. The dashboard clock was frozen at 12:07 a.m., the exact moment the creature had appeared. No matter how many times I tried to start the engine, it refused to budge. "We can't stay here," Megan whispered, her voice hollow. "Something's not right." Desperate, we decided to abandon the car and run, hoping to find help. The dirt road twisted and turned, but every path we took led us back to the same spot we had started from. It was as if the road itself was alive, a sentient entity intent on keeping us trapped in its perpetual loop. As night fell once more, the horrors began anew. The scratching returned, louder and more insistent, accompanied by faint whispers that seemed to call our names. Shadows moved just beyond the edge of our vision, and the oppressive darkness pressed in on us from all sides. We huddled together, the weight of our predicament crushing us. "What do you think it wants?" Megan asked, her voice barely a whisper. "I don't know," I replied, tears streaming down my face. "But we have to find a way out." Hours passed in a state of desperate fear, the cycle repeating itself with each attempt to escape. By the third night, we were exhausted, both physically and mentally, our hope dwindling with each passing moment. Then, just as dawn began to break, the whispers ceased, and the scratching stopped. The road ahead seemed different, the oppressive atmosphere lifting as if the land itself was granting us mercy. With renewed determination, we followed the path that now appeared clear, the sun rising to guide us towards salvation. When we finally emerged from the forest, the world felt surreal, as if we had crossed a threshold between life and death. The road we had traveled was gone, replaced by an empty expanse of fields and open sky. We stumbled towards a nearby farmhouse, relief flooding our senses as we knocked on the door. The door swung open, and a concerned neighbor greeted us. "Are you all right?" she asked, her eyes filled with worry. We nodded weakly, too shaken to speak. She led us inside, offering us water and a place to rest. As we sat by the kitchen table, the sun fully risen, we tried to make sense of what had happened. But our memories were fragmented, our minds clouded by fear and confusion. The only thing we could recall clearly was the name Abigail, echoing in our minds like a haunting refrain. The authorities conducted a thorough search of the area, but there was no sign of the nameless road we had traveled, no evidence of the creature that had pursued us. Our experience remained a mystery, a chilling tale that locals would whisper about for years to come. Months passed, and life slowly returned to normal, but the scars of that night lingered. Megan and I struggled with the memories, our relationship strained by the unspoken horrors we had endured. The name Abigail haunted us, a puzzle we could never solve, a reminder of the thin line between reality and the supernatural. Years later, I still drive through the outskirts of Texas, the vastness of the landscape a stark contrast to the claustrophobic nightmare we had escaped. Sometimes, when the moon is full and the road stretches endlessly before me, I catch a glimpse of red eyes in the distance, staring back with a cold, unyielding gaze. My heart races, the fear of reliving that night gripping me once more. If you ever find yourself lost on a desolate road, heed my warning. Some paths lead to places where time stands still, where shadows watch and wait, ready to claim those who dare to wander too far into the darkness. Remember the name Abigail, and pray that you never encounter the horrors that lie hidden in the heart of the night. Story number 2. Whispers Among the Corn. I never imagined that the vast, silent fields of Nebraska could hold such darkness. Growing up in the heartland, surrounded by endless stretches of corn and the comforting hum of rural life, I always believed there was a simple beauty to this land. But standing here on my old farmstead, I realize how little I truly understood about the secrets this soil holds. My name is Thomas Miller, and for the past 30 years, I've tended to this corn farm with unwavering dedication. After my wife passed away 5 years ago, the farm became my sanctuary, a place where memories lingered in every rustling leaf and every golden ear of corn. Life was quiet, almost monotonous, but in that quiet, I found peace. That peace was shattered one crisp autumn evening. It started subtly, as many unsettling things do. The wind began to pick up, carrying with it a faint melody that seemed to dance through the cornfield. At first, I dismissed it as the natural sounds of the wind weaving through the tall stalks. But as nights passed, the melody became more distinct, evolving into a gentle song with lyrics that sent chills down my spine. Thomas. Thomas. The voice seemed to whisper, calling my name with a haunting familiarity. I couldn't shake the feeling that someone, or something, was reaching out to me from the depths of the field. Determined to uncover the source of these nightly serenades, I decided to take matters into my own hands. One particularly clear night, armed with a sturdy flashlight and a resolve born from sleepless nights, I ventured out into the cornfield. The moon cast silvery shadows, and the air was thick with the scent of earth and growing things. As I walked deeper into the field, the song grew louder, more insistent. The corn swayed gently around me, creating a natural tunnel that seemed to guide me toward the heart of the mystery. My footsteps were muffled by the soft earth, and every rustle of the leaves heightened my senses. Then, amidst the towering stalks, I saw it, a wooden statue, weathered by time and nature, standing alone in the center of the field. It was a figure of a woman, carved with meticulous detail, her face frozen in a serene smile. Her dress flowed gracefully, and her eyes, though carved from wood, seemed almost alive under the beam of my flashlight. "Who are you?" I whispered to the silent figure, feeling an inexplicable pull towards her presence. The song reached a crescendo, and the air around me seemed to thicken with an unseen energy. Without fully understanding why, I reached out and touched the statue's hand. The moment my fingers made contact with the cold wood, a surge of electricity shot through me. The gentle melody twisted into a cacophony of screams that echoed through the cornfield, drowning out all other sounds. The once comforting night air now felt oppressive, heavy with anguish and fear. Instinctively, I pulled my hand away, my heart pounding in my chest. The statue began to emit a faint glow, the light pulsating in rhythm with the now deafening screams. Panic overtook me as I realized the gravity of what I had encountered. Without thinking, I hurled the statue into the center of the field, hoping to break whatever curse it held. As the wooden figure hit the ground, the screams intensified, reaching a fever pitch that threatened to shatter my sanity. The ground beneath me trembled, and the cornfield seemed to come alive, the stalks bending and twisting as if trying to grasp at me. I stumbled backward, tripping over roots and rocks, desperate to escape the nightmarish scene unfolding around me. With every ounce of strength, I turned and ran, the oppressive darkness chasing me through the maze of corn. The screams followed, a relentless reminder of the terror I had unleashed. My flashlight flickered wildly, casting erratic shadows that danced and merged with the true darkness of the night. I didn't stop until I reached the safety of my farmhouse, collapsing onto the porch steps, gasping for breath. The screams had ceased, replaced by an eerie silence that hung heavy in the air. Trembling, I looked back toward the cornfield, expecting to see the statue restored or some sign of what had transpired. But there was nothing, no trace of the wooden woman, no evidence of the chaos that had ensued. The next morning, I awoke to a scene of devastation. The once lush and vibrant cornfield was now a desolate wasteland. Every stalk of corn was withered and dead, the field barren and lifeless. My heart sank as I surveyed the damage, the lifeless rows of corn a stark contrast to the thriving field I had nurtured for decades. I called the local authorities, but they were baffled by the extent of the destruction. No one could explain how an entire field of corn could wither overnight, leaving no trace of what had caused such devastation. As days turned into weeks, the incident became a whispered legend in the nearby towns, a cautionary tale of the supernatural forces that might dwell in the heartland. Yet, despite the destruction, a lingering sense of unease remained. That night, as I sat alone in my farmhouse, I heard the faintest whisper of a song carried on the wind. My blood ran cold as I recognized the melody, a haunting echo of the song that had led me to the statue. The familiar lyrics, once gentle and inviting, now carried an undercurrent of sorrow and longing. "Thomas! Thomas!" The voice seemed to call, drawing me back to the field where the corn lay dead. I stared out the window, the moonlight reflecting off the lifeless stalks, and wondered if I had truly broken the curse or merely awakened something far more sinister. Months passed, and the field gradually began to show signs of life again, new shoots sprouting from the barren ground. But the memory of that night lingered, a constant reminder of the thin line between peace and terror. I found myself unable to shake the feeling that the song still called out to me, a haunting melody that would forever echo in the depths of the Nebraska night. Years later, I still hear the whispers among the corn, a gentle song that calls my name in the dead of night. The field thrives once more, but the scars of that night remain, etched into the soil and my very soul. I often catch glimpses of a figure in the moonlight, a woman in white standing silently among the corn, her hollow eyes watching me with an eternal sorrow. If you ever find yourself wandering through the remote fields of Nebraska on a clear autumn night, listen closely to the whispers carried by the wind. Respect the land and its hidden secrets, for some melodies are best left unheard, and some statues are better left undisturbed. The shadows of the cornfield watch and wait, ready to claim those who dare to uncover the dark truths that lie beneath the surface. Story number 3. Embers in the Dark. I never considered myself superstitious, but the Appalachian Mountains have a way of shaking even the most grounded souls. Growing up in Knoxville, I'd heard countless tales about the deep woods, stories of lost hikers, eerie noises, and shadows that moved just out of the corner of your eye. As a seasoned hunter, I prided myself on my knowledge of the wilderness, confident that nature's mysteries were no match for my experience. But nothing could have prepared me for that night. It was late October, the air crisp with the scent of fallen leaves and the promise of winter. My friends, Mike, Sarah, and Jake, joined me for a weekend hunting trip deep into the heart of Appalachia. We sought the thrill of tracking elusive game, escaping the confines of city life for the raw embrace of the forest. Our plan was simple: set up camp near a secluded clearing, enjoy the camaraderie, and return with stories to rival the local legends. As dusk settled, we gathered around the campfire, the flames casting dancing shadows on our faces. The woods around us were alive with the sounds of nocturnal creatures, a symphony of hoots, rustles, and distant howls. Mike, ever the storyteller, began recounting a local legend about the Ember Eyes, a mysterious creature said to haunt these woods, its glowing red eyes visible only in the darkest nights. Sarah laughed it off, but Jake's expression remained thoughtful, his gaze fixed on the flickering flames. The first night passed without incident, the fire crackling and our laughter mingling with the sounds of the forest. But as the moon reached its zenith, an unsettling stillness descended upon the woods. The usual chorus of night creatures fell silent, replaced by an oppressive quiet that pressed in on us from all sides. It was then that we heard it, a distant, mournful howl that sent a chill down my spine. Determined to keep our spirits high, we tried to dismiss the sound as a lone wolf or a restless coyote. However, the uneasy feeling lingered, a shadow of doubt creeping into our minds. We decided to take turns keeping watch, ensuring that no surprises would disrupt our uneasy peace. Late that night, as Jake dozed off beside the dying embers of the fire, I noticed a faint glow moving through the trees. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light or perhaps another hunter passing by. But as I squinted into the darkness, the glow intensified, revealing not a flickering flame, but a pair of bright, crimson eyes staring back at me from the depths of the forest. My heart pounded in my chest as the realization dawned on me: these were no ordinary eyes. They burned with an unnatural intensity, piercing through the blackness like embers ignited by a hidden fire. I blinked, trying to clear my vision, but the eyes remained fixed on me, unblinking and unyielding. "Guys, wake up," I whispered urgently, shaking Jake awake. "There's something out there." Mike and Sarah stirred, their groggy eyes meeting mine with confusion. We strained our ears, listening for any movement, but the forest remained eerily silent except for the distant howling that had resumed, now closer and more menacing. Without warning, the creature emerged from the shadows, its massive form towering over us. Its fur was singed and charred, giving it a menacing, almost spectral appearance. The glowing red eyes were the only visible feature on its monstrous face, radiating a malevolent intelligence that sent waves of fear crashing over me. Before I could react, the creature lunged, its powerful limbs driving it forward with terrifying speed. We scrambled to our feet, the campfire's embers casting fleeting shadows as we backed away in panic. Mike grabbed his rifle, aiming shakily at the creature, but it was already upon us, its presence overwhelming and oppressive. "Run!" I shouted, pushing Sarah and Jake towards the edge of the clearing. The creature's howls reverberated through the night, a sound that seemed to pierce my very soul. As we sprinted into the dense underbrush, the creature followed, its heavy footsteps thudding against the earth like the beating of a war drum. The forest became a labyrinth of fear, the trees closing in on us as we desperately searched for an escape. Branches whipped against my face, leaves scratching my skin as we pushed forward, driven by sheer adrenaline and terror. The howls and the creature's relentless pursuit created a cacophony that drowned out any rational thought. Suddenly, I tripped over a root, sending me sprawling onto the cold, damp ground. I glanced back to see Mike and Sarah struggling to keep up, their breaths ragged and eyes wide with panic. The creature loomed closer, its red eyes never leaving mine, the malevolent smile on its face promising nothing but doom. Summoning every ounce of strength, I dragged myself up and began crawling, praying that I could find some semblance of safety. The forest seemed to shift around us, the path we had followed now obscured by thick underbrush and tangled vines. The howls grew louder, closer, until the creature was right behind me, its presence suffocating. Just as all hope seemed lost, a blinding light pierced through the darkness, a helicopter overhead, its spotlight cutting through the night. The creature recoiled, hissing in frustration as the light forced it to retreat into the shadows. I scrambled to my feet, waving frantically at the rescuers as we made our way towards the clearing. The helicopter landed with a thud, and paramedics rushed to our aid. Mike and Sarah were disoriented but unharmed, while I limped away, my legs trembling from the adrenaline and fear. As we watched the creature disappear into the forest, a sense of relief washed over us, tempered by the lingering dread of what we had encountered. In the days that followed, the authorities conducted a thorough search of the area, but the creature remained elusive, blending seamlessly into the depths of the Appalachian wilderness. The Ember Eyes became a new legend, our terrifying encounter adding another layer to the region's rich tapestry of folklore. I often find myself staring into the night, the memory of those glowing red eyes haunting my dreams. The forest holds its secrets close, its darkness alive with the echoes of the past and the whispers of the unknown. Sometimes, when the moon is full and the wind carries the scent of burning embers, I swear I can hear the distant howls, a reminder that some mysteries are meant to remain unsolved. If you ever venture into the deep woods of Appalachia, heed the warnings of the locals and respect the boundaries of the wild. For in the heart of the forest lies a darkness that watches and waits, ready to ensnare those who dare to challenge its eternal vigil. And remember, some eyes are better left unobserved, their ember glow a beacon for the lost and the damned. Story number 4. Shadows on the Farmstead. I never thought solitude could be so suffocating. Growing up in the heart of Chicago, surrounded by the relentless hustle and endless noise, the idea of moving to a remote farm in Kansas seemed like the perfect escape. My name is Laura Mitchell, and 3 years ago, my husband passed away unexpectedly, leaving me to raise our teenage daughter, Emily, alone. The grief was overwhelming, and the decision to leave the city was both an attempt to heal and a desperate bid for peace. We arrived at the old farmstead on a chilly October evening. The sprawling fields of corn stretched out before us, swaying gently in the autumn breeze. The farmhouse, a sturdy wooden structure with peeling paint and creaky floors, stood isolated, 20 miles from the nearest town. The serenity of the place was exactly what I needed, or so I thought. The first few weeks were idyllic. Emily thrived in the open air, exploring the vast expanse of land, while I found solace in tending to the garden and maintaining the house. Nights were peaceful, filled with the sounds of crickets and the rustle of leaves. But as the days turned into weeks, an undercurrent of unease began to settle over the farmstead. It started subtly. Late one evening, as I was settling down with a book, I heard a soft thudding at the back door. Assuming it was just a stray animal, I dismissed it and continued reading. But the sounds persisted, growing more distinct with each passing night, footsteps crunching on the gravel driveway, doors creaking open and closed, and faint whispers that seemed to ride the wind. One night, the disturbances escalated. As I lay in bed, the sound of footsteps echoed outside my bedroom window. My heart raced as I approached the window, pulling back the curtain to peer into the darkness. There, standing motionless on the porch, was the figure of a man dressed in an old-fashioned suit. His eyes were hollow, and his presence was unnervingly cold. I recoiled in fear, pulling the curtains shut and locking the window. The next morning, I discovered large, muddy footprints leading from the edge of the cornfield to the front door of the house. There were no footprints going back, as if the visitor had vanished into thin air after his brief visit. Trembling, I reviewed the footage from our security camera, hoping to catch a glimpse of the intruder. What I saw chilled me to the bone, a man standing in the shadows, staring intently through the bedroom window, his gaze empty and lifeless. Panicked, I called the local sheriff's office. Officer Daniels arrived within the hour, his face a mix of concern and skepticism. "We'll check it out," he assured me, though his eyes betrayed a hint of doubt. After a thorough search of the property and the surrounding fields, he returned empty-handed. "No sign of anyone," he reported. "It might have been a wild animal or someone passing through. We'll keep an eye out." But Officer Daniels' words did little to quell my growing dread. That night, the disturbances returned with a vengeance. The front door was violently thrown open, slamming against the wall with a force that rattled the entire house. The sound of laughter echoed through the halls, a chilling, childlike giggle that seemed to emanate from the very walls. I woke Emily, both of us huddled together in fear as the laughter grew louder, intertwining with the ominous footsteps outside. Terrified, I grabbed my phone and dialed the sheriff again, but there was no signal. "We need to leave," I whispered, holding Emily tightly. But the house felt like a living entity, its oppressive presence keeping us bound within its walls. Desperate for answers, I decided to delve into the history of the farmstead. Late one afternoon, I visited the local library, poring over old records and newspaper clippings. I discovered that the farm had once belonged to a man named Henry Caldwell, who had mysteriously disappeared along with his family 50 years ago. The case had gone cold, with no leads or suspects. Locals had always whispered about the haunted nature of the property, but nothing concrete had ever been found. Armed with this new information, I returned to the house, determined to confront whatever presence haunted us. That night, as the moon cast long shadows across the land, I sat in the living room, holding Henry Caldwell's journal that I had found in the attic. His entries spoke of isolation, despair, and a growing sense of being watched. The last entry was particularly haunting. "The shadows move on their own, and I fear we will never leave this place." As I read aloud, the atmosphere in the house grew colder, the air thick with an unspoken tension. Suddenly, the front door slammed shut, and the room plunged into darkness. My flashlight flickered, and I saw the figure of Henry Caldwell standing in the doorway, his eyes hollow mirrors reflecting my own fear. "Why are you here?" I demanded, my voice barely steady. He didn't respond, but the air around him shimmered with a palpable sorrow. I could feel his pain, the lingering anguish of a man trapped by his own despair. "We mean no harm," I pleaded, taking a step forward. "We just want peace." His figure began to fade, but the sorrow in his eyes remained. "Leave now," his voice echoed in my mind, a haunting plea that resonated through every fiber of my being. The next morning, the house was eerily silent. The oppressive presence had lifted, but the damage had been done. The front door was wide open, the footprints from the night before still leading away from the house into the cornfield. Fear gnawed at me as I packed our belongings, the decision to leave now seeming like the only rational choice. As we drove away from Hollow Farm, the sun rising over the horizon felt like a rebirth, a chance to start anew. But the memory of those hollow eyes and the haunting laughter lingered, a constant reminder of the darkness that had once consumed our lives. Days turned into weeks, and we tried to rebuild our lives, but the scars of Hollow Farm remained. Emily was plagued by nightmares, reliving the moments of terror each night, while I struggled with the lingering sense of being watched. The local community remained tight-lipped, unwilling to discuss the inexplicable events that had unfolded on the farm. Years later, I still find myself gazing out over vast fields, the silence broken only by the whisper of the wind. The memory of Hollow Farm serves as a cautionary tale, a reminder that some places hold secrets too dark to uncover and that the shadows of the past can reach out and claim those who dare to confront them. If you ever find yourself seeking solitude in the remote corners of the world, heed this warning, respect the history and the stories that linger in the silence. For in the darkest nights, amidst the stillness of abandoned places, the echoes of lost souls wait patiently, ready to ensnare those who dare to disturb their eternal rest. Story number 5. Midnight Whispers Bridge. I never believed in ghosts or the supernatural. Growing up in the heart of Chicago, surrounded by the relentless pace of city life, tales of haunted bridges and restless spirits were nothing more than campfire stories meant to scare children on Halloween. But that all changed one fateful night when I decided to challenge the legends surrounding the old Midnight Whispers Bridge in rural Arizona. It was late October, a month when the nights grow longer and the air carries a crispness that hints at the coming winter. My job as a delivery driver often took me through remote areas, but this particular night was different. I had just completed a delivery in a small, secluded town and was making my way back to the highway when I approached the infamous bridge. The Midnight Whispers Bridge stood alone in the vast expanse of the Arizona desert, spanning a dry riverbed that had long since run dry. Locals avoided it after dark, claiming that on moonlit nights, the spirits of those who met tragic ends on the bridge would whisper their sorrowful tales into the night. Naturally, I scoffed at such notions. Rationality always won over superstition in my book. As I drove along the narrow, winding road leading to the bridge, the sky was a clear, star-studded canvas. The full moon cast a silvery glow over the landscape, creating long, eerie shadows that danced across the desert floor. The bridge loomed ahead, its old wooden planks withered and creaky, suspended precariously over the abyss below. I slowed my truck as I approached, feeling a slight unease despite my skepticism. The bridge seemed to stretch endlessly, the railings disappearing into the darkness beyond. The radio in my truck was quiet, except for the occasional crackle of static, as I focused on the road ahead. Suddenly, a soft knocking sound echoed through the night air, coming from the direction of the bridge. I glanced at the rearview mirror, expecting to see a fellow driver or perhaps a curious motorist. But there was no one in sight, only the desolate expanse of the desert surrounding the bridge. Probably just a branch tapping against the railing, I muttered to myself, shaking off the uneasy feeling. But the knocking continued, growing slightly louder and more insistent with each passing minute. I turned off the engine, my heart rate quickening. "What the hell?" I whispered, stepping out of the truck to investigate. The cool night air was a stark contrast to the warmth inside, sending shivers down my spine. I walked towards the bridge, the wooden planks groaning under my weight as I approached the center. As I reached the middle of the bridge, the knocking ceased abruptly, replaced by an oppressive silence that seemed to press in on me from all sides. I stood there, staring into the darkness below, trying to rationalize the sound. Just as I was about to turn back, a chill ran through me, and I felt a presence, something watching me from the shadows. Heart-pounding, I turned to look in the rearview mirror. There, in the reflection, I saw her, a woman in a flowing white dress, sitting alone in the passenger seat of my truck. Her eyes were empty voids, and a cold, eerie smile played on her lips. I stumbled back, a scream caught in my throat, as she remained motionless, staring at me with an intensity that made my blood run cold. "Who are you?" I demanded, my voice trembling with fear. She didn't respond. Instead, her smile widened, and the temperature around me seemed to drop further. I fumbled with the door handle, my hands shaking uncontrollably, but the door wouldn't budge. Panic surged through me as I realized I was trapped, the presence of the apparition growing more menacing with each passing second. Desperate to escape, I tried to force the door open, but it remained stubbornly closed. The woman's presence seemed to tighten around me, her hollow eyes unblinking and filled with an otherworldly sorrow. I could feel her emotions, a deep sadness and longing that seeped into my very being, making it hard to breathe. Suddenly, the engine sputtered and died, the truck falling silent. I frantically tried to restart it, my mind racing with fear and confusion. The woman's smile faded, replaced by a look of pure anguish, as if she was a lost soul yearning for release. Just as I managed to get the engine running again, the apparition vanished, the oppressive presence lifting as suddenly as it had descended. I breathed a shaky sigh of relief, glancing at the rearview mirror one last time. The empty passenger seat stared back at me, the haunting image of the woman in white lingering in my mind. Shaken to my core, I accelerated away from the bridge, the eerie silence of the desert returning to envelop me. As I drove, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had followed me, the image of the hollow eyes and sorrowful smile etched into my memory. The next morning, I found myself recounting the night's events to a local mechanic who listened with a sympathetic but skeptical ear. "You know," he said thoughtfully, "there have been a few reports of strange sightings on that bridge. Some say it's haunted by the spirit of a woman who lost her life there years ago." His words only heightened my unease, the rational explanations falling short of the terrifying experience I had endured. I decided to stay away from the bridge from that night on, but the memory lingered, a constant reminder of the thin veil between the living and the dead. Months passed, and life returned to normal, but the haunting image of the woman in white never left me. I often found myself glancing in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see her watching me from the shadows. The Midnight Whispers Bridge remained a place of mystery and fear, its dark legends becoming more entrenched in local lore. One evening, a year after that fateful night, I found myself driving past the bridge once more. The memory of the apparition was still vivid in my mind, and a sense of foreboding settled over me. As I approached the bridge, the full moon cast its silvery glow, illuminating the desolate path. I pulled over, the truck's engine humming softly as I stepped out to take a closer look. The air was still, the only sound the gentle rustling of leaves in the night breeze. I stared across the bridge, my heart racing, but saw nothing, no sign of the woman in white, no knocking sounds, just the endless expanse of darkness below. Shaking off the residual fear, I turned to leave, but something caught my eye in the rearview mirror. There she was again, the woman in white, her hollow eyes fixed on me from the passenger seat. This time, her presence was more aggressive, her sorrow replaced by a menacing intensity. "Please," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "Let me go." She didn't respond. Instead, she leaned forward, her empty eyes boring into mine, and the temperature dropped once more. I felt a desperate urge to escape, to flee from the haunting presence that seemed to control my very thoughts. Summoning every ounce of courage, I tried to start the engine, but it wouldn't turn over. The woman's smile returned, cold and unforgiving, as she began to reach out towards me with skeletal hands. Panic surged through me as I realized I was once again trapped, the bridge holding me in its supernatural grip. Just as the fear threatened to consume me, the engine roared to life, and I slammed my foot on the accelerator, tearing away from the bridge with all the speed I could muster. The apparition faded into the darkness, her haunting presence lingering only as a shadow in the rearview mirror. I drove away, heart pounding, vowing never to return to the Midnight Whispers Bridge. But deep down, I knew that some places are better left untouched, their dark secrets hidden beneath layers of time and fear. The memory of that night remained a chilling reminder of the unknown forces that lurk just beyond the veil of reality, waiting to claim those who dare to challenge their eternal dominion. If you ever find yourself driving alone through the quiet stretches of rural Arizona, heed my warning. Respect the legends, listen to the whispers in the wind, and remember that some bridges connect more than just 2 points on a map. They bridge the gap between the living and the dead, where shadows watch and spirits wait, ready to ensnare those who dare to cross their haunted paths. Story number 6. The Knock at Hollow Farm. I never thought that moving to Hollow Farm would change my family's life in ways we couldn't comprehend. Growing up in bustling Chicago, surrounded by the constant hum of the city, the idea of relocating to a secluded farm 20 miles from the nearest town seemed like the perfect escape from the chaos. My wife, Laura, and our 2 children, Emily and Jack, were all in favor of the move. We craved peace, a slower pace, and a chance to reconnect with nature. Hollow Farm was everything we had hoped for and more. Nestled amidst sprawling cornfields and bordered by dense woods, the old farmhouse stood as a relic of simpler times. The house, a sturdy wooden structure with peeling paint and creaky floors, exuded a charm that promised tranquility. The land was fertile, the soil rich and ready for planting, and the evenings were serene, filled with the sounds of crickets and the rustling of leaves. The first few weeks passed without incident. We settled into a comfortable routine, Laura tending to the garden, Emily and Jack exploring the fields, and me taking care of repairs around the house. The nights were particularly peaceful, the sky a canvas of stars unblemished by city lights. It was during one of these nights, under a canopy of twinkling constellations, that we first heard the knocking. It was late, around 11 p.m., when the sound echoed through the house. A rhythmic tapping at the front door, soft yet persistent. I glanced at Laura, who shrugged it off with a tired smile. "Probably just a branch tapping against the window," she suggested. I nodded, reassuring myself that it was nothing more than the wind playing tricks on us. But the knocking didn't stop. It continued every night, growing slightly louder and more insistent with each passing evening. One night, curiosity got the better of me. Armed with a flashlight, I approached the front door, the cold night air biting at my skin. I opened the door cautiously, expecting to see a neighbor or perhaps a stray animal. Instead, there was no one, only muddy footprints leading from the edge of the cornfield directly to our doorstep. Strangely, there were no footprints going back, as if whoever had come was meant to leave without return. "Jake, Emily," I called out, but there was no response. The children were sound asleep upstairs, their dreams undisturbed by the mysterious visitor. I closed the door, my mind racing with questions. Who was knocking? Why the footprints? Laura noticed my troubled expression and joined me at the door. "We should report this," she said softly, her concern evident. "Maybe there's someone lost out there." I nodded, but the idea of involving the authorities didn't sit well with me. Hollow Farm was isolated for a reason. We had chosen this place for its seclusion. The local sheriff's office was miles away, and I didn't want to attract unnecessary attention to our peaceful retreat. As nights turned into weeks, the knocking became a nightly ritual. Each evening, as darkness settled over the farm, the rhythmic tapping began. The footprints grew more defined, leading from the fields to the door, but still, no one returned the way they came. The tension in the house mounted, a silent fear that permeated our daily lives. One particularly restless night, the knocking was accompanied by faint laughter, a sound so eerie and out of place that it sent chills down my spine. I woke Laura from her sleep, the sound of her daughter's giggles echoing through the halls. "Did you hear that?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. She nodded, fear flickering in her eyes. "It's getting worse." The children sensed the unease, their usual bedtime stories replaced by hushed whispers and nervous glances. Emily clung to her favorite blanket, and Jack refused to leave his room, hiding under the covers with wide, terrified eyes. Determined to uncover the source of the disturbance, I decided to investigate further. The next evening, armed with a camera and a flashlight, I ventured out into the cornfield where the footprints led. The moon was high, casting an ethereal glow over the landscape. As I walked, the sound of my footsteps crunching on the dry stalks was the only noise that accompanied me. Suddenly, I stopped. There, illuminated by the moonlight, was an old wooden gate leading into a part of the farm we hadn't explored yet. The gate was half open, swaying gently in the breeze, as if inviting me in. My heart pounded in my chest as I approached, the camera capturing every moment. Inside the gate, the cornfield gave way to an overgrown path leading to a dilapidated barn. The structure stood abandoned, its roof sagging and walls covered in ivy. As I approached, the knocking sound grew louder, echoing from within. Summoning all my courage, I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The barn was dark, the only light coming from the moon filtering through the broken windows. Dust danced in the beams of light, creating an otherworldly atmosphere. I explored cautiously, my flashlight revealing remnants of a forgotten time, rusted tools, broken furniture, and faded hay bales. But there was no sign of anyone. As I turned to leave, a cold gust of wind swept through the barn, extinguishing my flashlight. In the darkness, the knocking resumed, louder and more frantic than ever. I fumbled to turn the light back on, my hands shaking uncontrollably. When the beam finally pierced the darkness again, I saw her, a woman in a flowing white dress standing at the far end of the barn, her face pale and eyes hollow. "Who are you?" I demanded, my voice trembling. She didn't respond. Instead, she began to walk towards me, her steps silent and deliberate. The air grew colder, the oppressive weight of her presence pressing down on me. As she reached out a hand, the knocking ceased abruptly, and the barn plunged back into darkness. I fled the barn, my heart racing, and made my way back to the house. Laura was waiting, her expression mirroring my fear. "We need to leave," I whispered urgently. "Something's not right here." That night, the knocking returned, louder and more aggressive. The laughter intertwined with the tapping, creating a cacophony of unsettling sounds. Without a moment's hesitation, we packed our belongings and left Hollow Farm, the fear driving us to abandon the place that was meant to be our sanctuary. We never returned, and the farm soon fell into further disrepair. Those who heard our story were skeptical, dismissing it as an overactive imagination fueled by the isolation of rural life. But the truth was far more terrifying. The house on Hollow Farm seemed to feed off our fear, its dark history intertwined with the restless spirit of the woman in white. In the days that followed, news spread of other families who had moved to Hollow Farm only to leave in panic after experiencing the same inexplicable phenomena. The sheriff's office was baffled, unable to provide explanations or solutions. The local legends grew, the house becoming a place of dread and mystery. Years later, I still wake up in the middle of the night, haunted by the memory of those knocking sounds and the hollow eyes of the woman in white. My family has moved on, but the scars of Hollow Farm remain, a constant reminder of the thin line between peace and terror. If you ever find yourself drawn to the allure of a secluded retreat, heed my warning. Some places hold secrets that are better left undisturbed, their darkness waiting patiently for those who dare to uncover their hidden truths. For in the heart of the night, amidst the silence of the cornfields, the echoes of the past linger, and the shadows watch, ready to claim those who dare to step through the door. Story number 7. The Windowless House. I never believed in curses or haunted places. Growing up in the heart of Kansas, surrounded by endless fields and the quiet hum of rural life, ghost stories were just tales to scare children on Halloween. But that all changed one fateful summer night when curiosity led me and 3 friends into the depths of darkness we never anticipated. It was mid-July, the heat of the day giving way to the cooler embrace of evening. My friends, Jake, Sam, and Mia, had always been adventurous, seeking thrills in the ordinary. When we heard about the old house on Elm Street, abandoned and shrouded in local legend, it was Jake's idea to explore it. The stories were unsettling. Anyone who entered the house would vanish without a trace, leaving nothing behind but the whispers of the wind through broken windows. We should check it out, Jake had said, his eyes gleaming with excitement. Just to prove those stories wrong. Mia hesitated, her practical nature wavering under Jake's persuasive enthusiasm. Are you sure that's a good idea? What if there's something out there? Sam, ever the skeptic, shrugged. It's just an old house. Probably vandalism or something. Let's go. We agreed, dismissing the cautionary tales as mere superstition. Equipped with flashlights, cameras, and a sense of invincibility, we set off under the cover of darkness. The drive to Elm Street was uneventful, the route winding through vast cornfields that seemed to stretch into eternity. As we approached the house, a chill ran down my spine despite the summer night. The structure stood solitary, its windows shattered and walls cloaked in ivy. The front door, surprisingly intact, creaked ominously as Jake pushed it open. "All right, let's see what's inside," he said, stepping into the foyer. We entered cautiously, the door slamming shut behind us with a force that made us jump. The interior was as dilapidated as the exterior, dust-covered furniture, broken chandeliers, and peeling wallpaper that spoke of years of neglect. The air was thick with the scent of mildew and decay, making it hard to breathe. "Guys, check this out," Sam called from the staircase, pointing towards the second floor. "There's something upstairs." We climbed the creaky stairs, flashlights illuminating the dark hallway. The thumping sound we heard earlier had grown louder, more rhythmic, almost like footsteps. As we reached the top, the noise stopped abruptly, replaced by an oppressive silence that pressed in on us from all sides. In one of the bedrooms, we found a dusty journal lying on a broken dresser. Jake picked it up and began to read aloud. June 3rd, 1980. Another day trapped in this cursed house. The shadows move on their own, and the walls seem to breathe. I fear I will never leave. A chill swept through the room as Jake continued reading the journal, the words painting a picture of despair and entrapment. Suddenly, a loud crash came from downstairs, followed by the sound of the front door being kicked open. "We need to get out of here," Sam said urgently, grabbing Mia's arm. But as we turned to flee, the door had vanished, replaced by solid wall. Panic set in as we realized the horrifying truth: there was no escape. "Don't move," a cold voice commanded from the shadows. A figure emerged, a woman in a tattered white dress, her face pale and eyes hollow. "What do you want?" Jake demanded, trying to keep his voice steady. The woman pointed towards the attic. "Find her." Confused and terrified, we followed her direction, our flashlights revealing the long-abandoned rooms filled with broken furniture and shattered glass. The attic door creaked open on its own, revealing a dusty space cluttered with old belongings. In the center stood another figure, a young girl, her eyes empty, her face frozen in an expression of sorrow. As we approached, the room grew colder, our breaths visible in the frigid air. "She's lost," the woman whispered, her voice echoing through the attic. "Help her." Before we could respond, the room began to spin, the walls closing in on us as the journal's words resonated in our minds. The shadows move on their own, I thought, realizing the connection between the journal and our current predicament. Suddenly, the woman and the girl vanished, leaving us alone in the oppressive darkness. The attic door slammed shut, trapping us within its confines. We need to stay calm, I urged, trying to maintain control as fears threatened to consume us. But the sense of being watched was overwhelming, the whispers of lost souls surrounding us, pushing us towards madness. We huddled together, the weight of our situation sinking in. Hours passed, each moment stretching into an eternity. Exhaustion set in, our minds fraying at the edges as the horrors of the house played out around us. Finally, as dawn broke, the door creaked open, the sunlight streaming in and dispelling the darkness. We stumbled out of the house, our faces pale, our bodies numb from the night's ordeal. Looking back, the house seemed to dissolve into the surrounding cornfields, as if it had never existed. But the scars of that night remained, etched into our souls. Jenna, the friend who had led us into the house, was missing, her fate a haunting mystery. The authorities searched the area, but all they found were the broken remnants of our campsite and the chilling journal we had brought with us. We left town soon after, unable to cope with the memories and the loss of Jenna. The house on Elm Street became a distant, terrifying legend, a warning to those who dared to seek out the unknown. Years later, I still wake up in the middle of the night, hearing the soft thumping of footsteps and the echo of hollow voices calling my name. The image of the woman in white and the lost girl remains vivid in my mind, a constant reminder of the thin veil between our world and the supernatural. If you ever find yourself in a small town, hear the stories of the old abandoned house and resist the urge to uncover its secrets. For some places are better left untouched, their mysteries hidden in the shadows, waiting for the next curious soul to fall into their eternal trap.